Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Today's video is a crash course on how to do your brows. So if you're not familiar with my crash course series, I basically take a little bit of theory and a little bit of practice and I bring the two together. I talk about what kind of brushes, what kind of colors, etc. As they relate to a product category and different people with different skin tones, etc. And then I show you how I actually apply that product. So today is all about eyebrows and eyebrow products.
Hi guys, so actually for this crash course I decided to split it up into two parts. After I finished editing the tutorial I realized that it was really long and I was kind of running out of steam when I went to talk about products and brow shapes and like the different colors of brow products and stuff like that. So make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for part 2 where I'm going to talk about how to choose a brow product. Now back to the video.
So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to move on to the tutorial. I'm going to zoom you guys in and you're going to see how I do my brows. I'm also going to explain how to do your brows in general. So if you don't want them this bold or whatever, I'm going to explain all of that. So stay tuned. So I'm actually just going to show you guys how I do both of my brows because if you notice, I have more brow hairs on this side than this side. They're also slightly different shapes. I'm comfortable with them being different shapes. I don't try to make them exactly symmetrical, although you could. But the reason I'm doing both is because I want you guys to see how much easier it is to fill in this brow versus this brow and like different techniques I'm going to use on each brow. It's best to start off with a little bit of foundation and or powder on first, in my opinion, when you're doing your brows. It can be hard to get brow products to adhere to bare skin. That being said, creams and powders tend to stick well to each other, whereas like consistencies tend to not stick well to each other. So powder tends to kind of just crumble off of powder and cream tends to slide off of cream. So I use a cream product in my brows. I use the Tarte Amazonian Clay Brow Mousse and this shade is in Rich Brown. That means I want to have a little bit of powder down before I do this because the dryness of the powder will give this creamy texture something to grab onto. If you're using a brow powder or eyeshadow to fill in your brows, try doing it on top of foundation that is still wet if you find that the brow powder is not really lasting or sticking well onto your skin. So like I said, I'm going to use my Tarte Brow Mousse and I'm going to use my Anastasia number 14 brush. It's an angled brush with a spoolie on the other end. I am just going to dip directly into the pot. If you're a makeup artist, you definitely want to be scooping this out first onto a palette, but this is my personal one. So I'm going to start with my easier brow, which is the brow that has more brow hairs, and I only have a tiny bit on the brush. When you're starting out, maybe you want to try and work it into a workable consistency on the back of your hand before you go ahead and apply it straight to your face. But I know this product, so I know exactly how much I need. So I know what shape I want my brows, so I just go ahead and fill them in usually, but I'm going to show you guys a way to create a template for yourself if you're trying to kind of restructure your brow or you don't really know where to start. So I'm going to use my brush as like kind of like a protractor of sorts, and from the nostril straight up is where you want the brow to begin. So actually I'm going to use a pen for this and I'm going to just put a little dot right there, and then I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to go from the nostril through the pupil when I'm looking straight ahead, and that's where the arch should be. My arch is already there, so I'm not going to draw a dot. And then from the nostril through the outer corner of the eye is where your tail should be. And it looks like my tail is already right there, so we're good. So now for the actual fill. Since I'm working with an angled brush, and you should use this kind of brush with a powder as well, first I'm going to start with the bottom of my brow. Now I'm going to apply a really light amount of pressure because you don't want to deposit too much product at once. And I'm just kind of outlining the bottom of the brow. Now holding the brush at the same angle, so pretty much flat, I'm going to take that color and flick it upwards. And I have a little bald spot right there. I'm going to show you how I fill that in later. But right now, I'm just making sure to get like a base down. So then I'm flipping the brush over and I'm gonna gently comb through this. Where I have a bold spot, let me just show you guys. If I apply more product right there, I'll pick up a little more product just to show you guys. So I filled in that bald spot, right? Now I'm combing through the bald spot and I'm applying a lot of pressure. Takes the product right off. So this is for combing product through your hair. If you're combing over a bald spot, you want to be really, really gentle, or else it's just gonna lift the product right off your bare skin. So because I have sparse brows, I am combing super, super gently. But when I comb the brows, I comb them up and out. Okay, now I like to enlarge my brows a little bit. So I'm going to brush the hairs down. And now I can kind of see where all the brow hairs start. So I'm gonna pick up a little bit more product again. I'm going to make a pretty much parallel line right there. Notice I haven't really gone past the arch yet. And then comb it down. And then just comb through again. So see how I kind of made this part parallel all the way up to the arch? If anything, it gets slightly larger over here, even though I haven't really filled in that spot yet. But generally, if you want that like kind of modern brow that everybody is after these days, that's what you want to do. You want to make this part relatively parallel. If anything, getting slightly larger at the inner portion. The other thing is I raise my brows while I'm doing this. When your brows are raised, they're naturally more arched. When you relax your brows, they become more straight. I used to make the mistake of trying to straighten out my arch while I had my brows raised, and then when I would relax them, they almost pointed downwards. So just make sure you're compensating for that in whatever way possible. Maybe don't raise your brows. I'm just in the habit of doing it, but just be aware that when you're not raising your brows versus when you are, changes their shape. So now I'm gonna work on the tail. I'm picking up a tiny bit of product on the brush again and just drawing a little outline for myself. And then I'm taking the remainder of the product that's on the brush and filling in the rest of the tail. From the arch to the tail, I like to give it a little bit of a hard outline, and I add some volume there because I have very sparse brow tails to begin with. Which means, again, that when I'm brushing through the product, I want to brush super, super gently. Okay, so now I kind of have a base down, and I'm gonna go in and add some texture. That's why a brush like this, that's like really thin, is important for this step. If you have a lot of missing brow hairs like me, if you want this to go a lot faster, you know, whether you don't have as sparse brows as I do, or you're using a powder or something else, you can use a slightly larger, slightly less stiff brush than this. Like this Tarte one that actually came with the brow mousse is larger, so it's still pretty thin, so I find it good for adding brow hairs, but not quite as good as the Anastasia one over here. So I'm gonna pick up a tiny bit of product again, and now that we have a base down, I can start adding individual hairs. How you hold the brush for this is really important. So when I'm going in the tail, I'm gonna hold it kind of flat to the brow again. I'm almost just going in little dashes. And while this part is parallel, I'm making sure the tail tapers off. Now, if you go overboard on this step, you can blend again with the spoolie. I pretty much like how it turned out, so I'm not gonna blend over that area. Now I'm gonna do the same thing to the front and middle portion of the brow. Instead of holding my brush flat like this, I'm gonna turn it like this. And I'm going to, I like it to be square on the bottom and rounded out on the top. So I'm going to kind of make that shape by drawing individual brow hairs by holding the brush more vertically. And I'm not drawing them straight up, I'm drawing them kind of diagonally and curving towards the natural growth of my brow. And right here I get a little bit more vertical just to draw that front portion in. And it's really key here that you don't have too much product on the brush, because you want this inner portion to be lighter and the tail to be the strongest for it to look the most natural. and like not super harsh. And then in this area right here where it's looking a little bit sparse, the hairs grow more this way, so that's the direction I'm gonna draw the hairs in. I kind of want to perfect the bottom right here as well, so I'm gonna draw a straight line here, just because I don't think it was really strong enough from before. You want the tail and the bottom to be the most defined. Normally, I wouldn't add concealer underneath my eyebrow, but I'm just gonna show you guys how to do it. I do this usually if I have kind of messed up or brought my brow too low, or, you know, there's a learning curve with new clients, so I end up having to go back and conceal a little bit with clients sometimes if I go overboard on their brows. But basically using concealer underneath your brows is gonna make it look even more sharp and defined. It can make it look really, really clean. So let's say you use a powder and you want a really natural fill, but you don't feel like it looks so defined, but you find like the brow mousses and the brow pomades to look too chunky. Using concealer afterwards is a really great way to bring definition to the look without adding more brow product. So you can use an angled brush for this, or a flat definer brush, or a push liner brush. I'm using this push liner brush from NARS. I also have something that looks like this that's just a paintbrush from the craft store, so you can use either one. And I'm just gonna take this Maybelline concealer. It doesn't really matter. I find that having a little like pot style concealer around is really convenient for this. And I'm just going to take a tiny bit of this. And also normally I would do my brows before my eyeshadow, but I've already done my eyeshadow, so I have to be extra careful here not to blend it too far down. But I'm just going to do this. You can use a concealer that's a shade lighter as well to help with your brow highlight. And I'm going pretty much underneath the whole thing. And I'm just using my finger to pat out the edges there. And see how that just makes it look a lot more crisp? And then this is usually part of my eyeshadow routine, but it makes sense to include it in this video. I'm going to set this concealer with an eyeshadow that is lighter than my skin tone. I'm going to use the Meet Matrimony palette from the Balm and take this like cream colored shade over here. And I am just going to pat that where I put the concealer. Concentrate it more on this outer portion, because if you bring highlight all the way in, it's gonna make you look like you have headlights. And then with my blending brush, I'm just gonna get rid of that harsh line. And voila, you have a brow. Okay, now I'm not gonna really talk you guys so much in as much detail through this brow. I just want you to see how there's a lot less blending with this one, because I have a lot less brow hairs and a lot more like adding brow hairs, which was the last step I did with this one. So same thing, I'm just gonna pick up a little bit of product.
I'm gonna start at the base. Now see here, I'm like bald, so it takes a little bit of extra work.
See, in here, the product is taking really well and it's not blending away. Here, I'm having an issue. So I'm just using whatever's left on the brush here to kind of add a little bit of a base without having to blend too much, because blending will just take it away again. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the top portion of the brow. And again, I'm gonna brush this down and draw a parallel line. I'm gonna pick up a little more product and start to fill in the tail with little dashes. And you can work slowly. My hand just like goes this fast now because I've done my brows so many times, but you can feel free to work slowly. It's just that when you're drawing the hairs in, you know when you're doing winged liner and you press hard at first, and then to taper off the wing part, you slowly release pressure. It's the same concept with drawing in individual brow hairs. You want to kind of press and lift, press and lift, press and lift, and that's going to give a naturally tapered look to your brush strokes. Okay, the tail looks good. Now with whatever product is left on the brush, I'm gonna work on the front portion. So I am a lot more bald in this front portion than I am in this front portion. So I'm going to try and add a little bit of a base color with without picking up any additional product again. And I'm going to do that flicking upward motion. And I'm gonna try to round it off like that. This part takes a little bit more practice. Now picking up a tiny bit of product, I'm gonna add brow hairs again. And I'm holding the brush vertically for the front portion of the brow because your hairs naturally would grow up in this portion. So that is it, you guys. I hope you found this video helpful. Please let me know what you thought in the comments below and give this video a thumbs up if you want to see more crash course videos. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Please feel free to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at CatEyeSophie. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.